From closure-based APIs to async, check continuations, part 3. We continue with our app. In this simple app, we have a next button in our main view, and we have our controller, or our view model if you prefer, called support. When we tap the button, we call the method selectNextNumber in support, and then we wait, and then we get a number back somehow that we display inside of a circle. In part 1, we used a delegate-based API, and in part 2, we wrapped the delegate with a call in an async method. This time, we'll introduce a closure-based API, and once we get it working, we'll explore some async alternatives. This time, there is no use of CheckedContinuations. You'll have to return for part 4. So let's start in our controller. Here's our class support. It contains a method selectNextNumber, and inside of that, we choose a random number between 1 and 50, and then we print the number. Right now, we're not returning anything. We'll fix that in a moment. Over in the main view, we need a handle to the support, so we create an instance of it, and we need something to hold on to the current value that we're displaying on the screen, and we'll do that inside of a state. After this year's WWDC, I was told that we should use @state for support as well, so that if main view disappears, we aren't creating support again. As for what's displayed on the screen, in an extension, I'll conform to view and provide the body. It is, of course, a VStack with the image on top and a button on the bottom. When the button is tapped, the action will be to call support's selectNextNumber method. As for this image, I'm using a helper method here to take the int for current value and return some view. In this case, we'll produce an image using the SF symbols of that int surrounded by a circle. If it's 0, we won't draw it on the screen, and we'll make sure that it's displayed in a large size. So there's our view. Run the app. The flow looks something like this. Tap the button, selectNextNumber is called, and we print the number in the console. What we'd like to have happen is that it sends 27 back to main view and it can be displayed. The last couple times we've worked with the delegate-based API. This time we're going to start with a closure-based API. This part won't be new to you. So suppose selectNextNumber has something that takes a while between choosing the number and printing or returning that number. We don't want to freeze the UI, so we need something that returns without holding us up. One of the techniques that we know is to add a completion closure, which accepts an int and returns nothing, and so that instead of printing the number, we apply the completion to the number. Of course, that means that this call in main view is incorrect. We need selectNextNumber to accept a closure, and that closure has to take an int. The body of the closure is pretty simple. We just take the int that's provided to us and set current value to be that number. Now when we run the app and tap the button, the closure allows the number to be set inside of main view using the completion. But you knew how to do that already. Now let's look at an async alternative. There are two strategies. Strategy 1 we'll look at this time, where we'll create an async method, we'll move our implementation to it, and then we'll call the async method from the existing method. So main view isn't going to have to change at all. It will still call the closure-based API, and that method will go ahead and call our async method. So here's our existing method. Remember, the closure takes an int and returns nothing, and that helps us see that when we create nextNumber as an async method, because there's an int expected by the completion, nextNumber must return an int. Our second step was to remove the implementation of selectNextNumber and move it down here to nextNumber. Now it's not quite the same. Because nextNumber returns an int, we've replaced the last line of completion number with returning the number. Much simpler. Now we look at how we might implement selectNextNumber to call nextNumber. Well, let's just start by doing that. Call nextNumber. The signature of nextNumber is going to drive us to be able to fill in most of the rest of this. Because nextNumber is async, I need to call it with a wait. And as soon as I call it with a wait, it must be inside of some context that understands async. I'm going to put it inside of a task. In addition, nextNumber returns an int, and so we'll store the value returned by nextNumber as result. Look again at completion. Completion expects an int, and so we apply completion to result. We apply completion to the int we got back by calling nextNumber. Run the app. Tap the button. Let's follow the flow. When we tap the button we call Select Next Number, Select Next Number in turn calls Next Number and waits. At some point, Next Number returns an int to Select Next Number. Select Next Number bundles it up in the completion, and that's how we get that value back to main view. So this time we started with a closure-based API, and we created an async method that did the same thing, and then we called the async method from the closure-based one. Next time, we're going to call the async method from the main view. And then we're going to restore the original closure-based method and call that closure-based method from the async one. Why? Well, you'll have to come back next time.